Alright, so I guess this week for story time, it's not really gonna be a story time. I figured I'd just more like have just a little combine talk. Just kind of go over what combines we've had in the past or what combines we looked at. Because I know at some point the question will come up. What combines did you have before or something like that. So I guess we'll start where I can remember, and I'll include pictures of some of them in this video. I have them right here on my computer, so I don't miss any combines. But yeah, I guess the first combine that I can remember actually is a Pap had an International 93. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it. If you park it in a field and look across it from a longer distance, it doesn't look like a combine. It looks like a self-propelled windrower because it's so small. But that was I think the third combine that Pap ever used. And I remember it a little bit. I was at the age where whenever he combined, I wasn't allowed to go to the field with him. Because I was young and none of the combines had buddy seats in them, and he didn't want me riding on the platform or whatever. So I never got to go. I never actually got to ride in the field with in that combine or the next combine, which was a Gleaner K. And actually, we ended up. He had the first Gleaner K, and he really liked it. And then it had some issues. The engine was getting pretty weak in it, and the brakes didn't work very good, and all that stuff. But that one came with a 10-foot grain head on it, and no corn head on it. We still picked corn at the time because we had cows. Actually, we picked corn the whole way up until 2014. That was whenever we stopped picking corn. The cows left then, and we stopped picking corn in 2014. The cows left is around in the middle to end of 2000. It was right around the middle of 2015. The cows left, and whenever we ran out of ear corn, we just used shell corn in the feed ration. So. But yeah, he had that Gleaner K. And then we went up to a Massey Ferguson 550. Now that combine was, I think I was 9 or 10 at the time when that combine showed up. And that had the steps to get into the combine. It had a nice platform and everything there with a rail around it. So on that one, I was old enough that I was allowed to go ride on the combine with him. We'd set a 5-gallon bucket on the platform, and then I could sit and ride around on the combine. And then actually that combine was the first combine that I actually got to drive. He'd make the outside rounds, and then I'd combine the rest of the field with it. Actually, the Massey 550 has that combine. If it could tell stories, I'm sure it could tell a lot of good stories. The feeder house on it was twisted. So whenever you'd put it in the ground, one side would be right here, and the other side would be right about here. It was probably had about a 6-inch twist to it. And the whole reason it had a twist to it is because that combine was rolled. My pap bought it off off his brother, which is my uncle, and his brother bought it off another farmer before him that rolled it. So that combine it functioned fine. There was nothing wrong with it. Just the feeder house was twisted about 6 inches. So on a 13-foot head, you'd be digging ground on one end, and you'd be 6-7 inches off the ground on the other end. It was awful. We never ran combine and beans through it, but they said it was awful trying to combine beans with it. So that was the combine that I got to run. And and he sold that combine. And then we had a pull type International 80. That was the best combine ever. The combine never had a breakdown. It never ran out of power, and I think that combine was used very little. The International 80, you never ran out of power because if it got a little tough, you just put a bigger tractor in front of it. To a degree, we always used the 5065E on it, either that or the 3020. But so you never ran out of power, and we never had a problem climbing the hills either, because you were using a tractor instead of a self-propelled combine. The only thing I didn't like about the 80, I ran that the most. By that point, I was old enough that I was pretty much starting to run equipment on my own. Pap would just sit in the tractor that had the wagon behind it and watch me go around in circles. But the unloading auger on that was it was a two-man unloading auger. You had to like roll it out and then put it up. And it was a heavy son of a gun too. It was awful, and it was too short. Probably if the tongue was swung over the whole way for the combine, you could reach in the gravity wagon, but in order to get into a gravity wagon with the combine swung out, you had to back in on an angle just to get it to go over the wagon. And then it only had like a 26 bushel bin on it, so you couldn't make one round around a 3-acre field. You had to I think you could make 3/4 of a round, and then you'd have to unload, which it made it seem like you were getting a lot greater yield than what you actually were, because you were constantly having to dump all the time. But it didn't make the yields any better. But it was a great combine. He ended up selling that to an Amishman that was going to put 4 horses and a motor in front of it and use it to combine soybeans. Yeah, and then after that combine, we bought a pair of Gleaners he had them hauled in from Allentown. It was a Gleaner K and a Gleaner K2. The K2 was an absolute piece of junk, and I don't have any pictures of it because we hardly ever used it. So I do have a couple pictures of the K and a short little video of combining with the K. The K2 was the variable speed didn't work. The governor on the engine was shot. Pretty sure the engine was weak as all get out. Somebody should not have owned a welder that had that combine, because when something would break, they'd weld it and keep on going. The electric clutch for the header, that sucker was welded. I mean, there was no way. The only way to get that thing to work was to tear it off and put a new one on, because they welded it the whole way around. Even though there was a hole just to put a bolt in and lock it so it would go in whenever the separator would engage, but I guess they didn't have a bolt, so they welded it. There was a couple slip clutches that I guess they didn't want to tighten them anymore or figure out what was wrong, so they just welded them. Yeah, and then they probably didn't own a grease gun either, because whenever we got it, I went to grease it, and 2 grease fittings would take grease out of the whole combine. And all the other grease fittings had hard, old, dry grease in it. So that combine was used, and abused. Now the Gleaner K, whenever we got that one, it had a bearing out right away. It came off the trailer with a bearing out, and we just parked it, and then it was the bearing on the bottom variable speed pulley. Yeah, we put that bearing in it, and then it was it was usable. I didn't like it because I had a scary incident with it. The Gleaner K, it had a 3-row corn head on it, which I'll include a picture or two of it in here. And the wheels were turned in, so you had like an 11-foot tall combine. No, it was more than 11 feet. It was almost 12 feet tall, and it was about, I think, 92 inches wide or something. It wasn't, the combine wasn't 8 foot wide. So now we have some hills, so I was combining corn, and you had a combine up a hill. You couldn't combine down a hill because the back end would slide into the next row of corn. So I was combining corn with it, and I had a half full bin, which was my mistake. That was my dumbness on my part. I should have dumped the bin. And the wheel on the drive wheel on the uphill side started spinning. Well, that combine didn't have wheel brakes. Wheel brakes were an option, so it just had a transmission brake on it. So once it started spinning, the only thing you could do was push the clutch in. So I'm sitting on a side hill with a half full bin and a combine that's spinning. I could have swore the thing was going to go over. Somebody upstairs didn't want that combine to go over that day. Because I could have swore that thing was going. Because as soon as it started spinning, I threw the clutch in, but it had started hopping a little bit, and that was after that incident. I told Pap that combine gotta go. Because I was the one that ran it the most. I think he ran it once or twice, but I was the one that shelled all the corn that year, which it was only like 6 acres of corn, so it wasn't that big of it wasn't like we put 200 acres through it. It was only 6 acres of corn. But I told him, I said, Pap, that combine gotta go. And at that point, we had to replace another bearing on it, and he was getting a little frustrated with it because he didn't like the way it sounded. It had a 250 Chevy 6-cylinder that had a miss in it, and no matter what you could do, you couldn't get the miss out of it. So he wasn't really too thrilled about that combine having that miss in the engine. So he was already thinking about getting rid of it and sending it down the road. And I'm pretty sure once I told him that thing got to go, just because it was too skinny for the hills. And then once he took a tape measure to it and realized it wasn't even 8 foot wide, I think that sealed the deal. Well, that, and we had already went and looked at the John Deere 3300 for we previewed the sale and looked at the 3300, and he had really liked it. And so that just, he was going to buy for the right price. He was going to buy the 3300, and he just happened to get the right price, and he bought the 3300. Which, next to the International 80, that John Deere 3300 is top-notch combine. We haven't had to put a part on it yet. We did have to put 2 belts. Other than that, we haven't had to put a part on it yet. I think it only has 2,600 and some hours on it. I mean, it's a good little combine. But before he bought the 3300, and why we still had the K and the K2, I had gone up to Zeislof's and looked at a Case International 1620, because I was starting to get the idea that I was going to try my hand in the custom harvesting business. So I was looking for a combine. And he was looking for a different combine because he was getting frustrated with having to go every week and order and pick up parts for the K2. So I had went up and looked at the 1620, and I have pictures of that one too. I'll include in. They only wanted $9,900 for the 1620, and actually right now they're down to $7,900 on it. And probably the only time I'd actually consider it's once that price hits about $5,000. It's a rough looking combine. I went up and looked at it in 2014, and it's 2016 now, right about the same time. I went up over Christmas break because I had graduated high school, was in college, and I went up over Christmas break and looked at it. So come December this time, it'll be exactly 2 years since I looked at it. And they had it 2 years prior to when I went and looked at it. So it'll be going on, they had it 4 years. So it's a really rough looking 1620. It probably should just go to the salvage yard and be parted out. Alright, so yeah, it's the next day. I'm gonna finish this combine video up here. I think I left off on the talking about the International 1620. Yeah, that combine was a piece of junk. They still have it. I'm waiting for it to come down to about $5,000, and then I'm gonna go probably pick it up. By that point, it'll be about all it's worth. So, anyways, yeah. So I already mentioned the 3300, and pretty much now that's where we're at. It's the 3300, and I got the 6620 that I impulse bought because it was cheap. Which there's more videos to come on the 6620. I did get the feeder house off on it. The feeder house came off yesterday. Yesterday was Thanksgiving. I got the feeder house off. Found out it was pretty much all the little New Holland would lift. I didn't realize the feeder house would be so heavy on that combine, but it was pretty heavy. So the last combine I figured I'll mention here. I mentioned it before. Over at my other grandpa's, whenever he had his sale, he had an Oliver 33 combine. Actually, he had two of them. One sat in the building, and another one sat outside that they just kept robbing parts off of. It was a parts machine. The one that sat in the building, when it came time for his sale, it sat in the building for like, probably 15-20 years. But like every Christmas or Thanksgiving, either my dad or one of my uncles would go out on the way out the door as they were leaving, would stop and turn it over about a quarter turn just to keep the engine loose so it wouldn't freeze up. So when it came time for his sale, we pulled it out with the tractor and pop started it. The clutch was, they said the clutch was going out in it. I don't 100% believe that, because it pull started pretty easy. We ended up, you had to pull start it in reverse, since you couldn't hook a chain to the head and pull on it. But yeah, I was toying with the idea at the sale of buying that combine, because I knew it was going to go cheap. It was going to go cheap as dirt. I mean, the thing was from the 40s or 50s, open station. I have a picture of it I'll throw in here. Nobody was going to want that thing. It was going to go cheap as dirt. So I figured, well, for $500 at the most, I'd buy it. That was the plan until Dad told me that my one uncle was going to buy it. And Dad said it probably wouldn't be a good idea if I started bidding on it. So I figured I'll be the nice guy. I'll be the nice nephew and not bid on it while the sale was. It did end up going as cheap as dirt. It went for $300. My uncle did buy it. It's still sitting up at my grandpa's. In a different building though. Since he sold pretty much all the farm equipment off, there's a lot of shed space now. So it's sitting in a different building. I don't know what my uncle's plan is with it. I think he's planning on fixing it up and using it. I know the combine needs a clutch and a separator belt. I don't know what else it needs. So it's, I mean, if I would have bought it, I would have fixed it and hit the thing with a coat of paint pretty much right away. I'm not really a big fan of off name combines. I mean, combines, I like my John Deere's, Case IH, Massey Ferguson, New Holland, just because I can go to the dealer and get parts for them. But the more and more I read into the old Olivers, you can go to the auto parts store and get most of the parts, and I think Agco still carries most of the bearings for them. So that was something that you don't see an Oliver 33 combine every day. That was another reason. I thought it'd be neat to fix it up so where it was usable. Hit it with a coat of paint and I'll use it. I mean, it was an open station. I think we put maybe 20 acres a year through a combine at the most, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But yeah, so that's pretty much all it is for the combine talk. So thanks for watching, and please comment, rate, and subscribe. Have a good day, guys.